My name is David L. G. Sharp. The L and the G I don't like to use, but they're Lee and Garfield. I was born in Smithwood, Tennessee. Smithwood, right down the road, on the other side of Greenwood Cemetery. 210 Hill Street, born by gas. Reverend Mills was the one that delivered me, and his first name was Garfield. And that's where the Garfield came from. The Lee came from my uncle, and my David came from another uncle. So everybody that walked by that day got my name. I got their name. I grew up right across the street right behind the school, the church. What used to be Oakland Road is now Acorn Drive, and it was the Sharp plot. It was the Anna Sharp properties. 4012, 4008, 4006, Acorn Drive, that was all a tract of land that they had. It was heir to the Sharp clan. It was Jesse Sharp Sr. And Anna Foodwood Sharp. The land was bought by Joe Sharp, Joseph Sharp. And I think his wife's name was Sarah. And the Sarah just took off and went from there. They being Joe and Sarah had 3 kids, I think. Jesse, Maynard, they had 4. And I can't think of the last girl's name, but Hattie was the other one. Hattie Hall ended up marrying Jefferson Anderson Hall, who lived across the street from us at that time. And they had a lot of kids, And after they matriculated with the children, then she being Elizabeth Hall married Jeff Anderson Hall Jr., and they had, I think it was about 8 or 9 children. And she was raised by her grandmother. Miss Molden was the only thing I ever knew. And she was right next door to us. From what I understand, Joe Sharp brought the tract of land. Who he bought it from, we don't know. But they were supposed to have been like the 3rd family in this area. The community of Steph started over by where the old school is now. And Oakland AME Zion Church is right at the curve. At that point, you had to get out and walk over to the house. Where we're sitting now, where the Baptist church is, did not exist at that point. And by the 20s or the 30s, from what I understand, the loop came about.
What were your parents' names?
My father's name was Jesse James Sharp Jr. My mother's name was Lucille. She didn't like the M. Chesney Sharp. She was the daughter of Tip Chesney. Tip Chesney was a product of John Sharp, who was a product of John Chesney. And he was a product of Pharaoh Chesney. Pharaoh was the slave. And John was I think he was a sharecropper. I know my grandfather was. And they came out of Union County. And Pharaoh came out of Mecklenburg County, Virginia, Clarksburg. He is said to have lived to be 120 years old. He's said to have 23 kids. He had 2 families, one of which was sold off from him before they left Virginia. And he never saw them again. And then he started the family with Oni, and they had John, Sally, and Pearl, if I'm not mistaken. And then Tip. And after that, like I said, it came out to Tip had 11 kids. And he had 6 boys and 5 girls with Aretha McFeeder. That's on that side. On my father's side, we don't know a whole bunch, but we do know that Joe Sharp was as far back as we can go. I started school in Detroit. We moved up to Detroit for 3 years, and then we came back here in '55. And I started at Oakland Elementary, Oakland Colored School. And I went to the 7th grade there. I left in the 8th grade and went to Vine Junior. Went from Vine Junior to Austin in the 10th grade, 10, 11, 12. And then I left there and I went to the University of Tennessee, played in the band for two semesters. And then I transferred to Tennessee State University. At that time it was called Tennessee A&I State University. And I graduated from there in 1970.
What did you play in the band?
I was a trumpet player.
And were you in the band in high school? Were you in the band in high school?
I was in the band at Austin High School, yes. I was in there from the 8th grade to the 12th grade. And like I said, I left and went to UTK, yeah.
You have any fond memories when you were in school?
Not at UT.
Or before that, grade school and high school?
I started my musical career over here. I had a little plastic trumpet that I played, brief little songs that you could play with that little toy trumpet. And then, like I said, I started in the 8th grade with a real trumpet and used it. It's enlightened me. It got me into places I probably would have never gone if I had not. I played for Johnson's inauguration in '64. Played on national TV with UT's band in Louisiana. Tennessee State, we stayed on national TV. Professional football games consistently. Then I became a band director.
Is that what you do now?
No, I'm retired.
You're retired now?
I am very retired. May the 25th at 11 o'clock, 2005.
Okay.
I do not see anything with other children, other folks' children, and I don't have anything to do with music.
How long were you a music teacher?
I started teaching in '70. I stopped in 2005.
Did you all attend church growing up?
Say it again?
Did you all attend church growing up?
Oh yeah, here. Mm-hmm. Here at Foster Chapel. I came here, my sister came here. My mom and dad didn't usually come very often. But when we came over here, we were here with Reverend Matthews at the time. And then it transitioned from Reverend Matthews to Reverend McGee. And then I transitioned out because I left in '65 and I never came back. Everybody knew everybody, so you couldn't get by with anything. It was interesting. We didn't have nothing, and nobody else did either. So, po is po. We picked blackberries. That's about it. We picked blackberries and strawberries and played ball down in the field down here. That's about it. My mom and dad are buried in Oak Grove, and that's where he was working when I was born. And that's where he's buried. He's buried over there now. And she is too. Quite a few of the family buried over there. The Chesneys, some of the Chesneys are over there, and the rest of them are in Oak Grove Church up in Oak Grove. But we don't have anybody back there that I know of other than maybe the Halls. The Hall, in fact, I think the Halls are at the Emily Zion Church over here.
Do you remember any social activities that you would do growing up around this area?
Vacation Bible School was a big thing. It went for about a week. And they served Kool-Aid and hot dogs, and you went back home. That was about it. Yeah, they've had Christmas programs and things like that. You see, my aunt Juanita is buried in the National Cemetery, and my aunt Alma is buried in Oak Grove. Sarah is buried in Detroit because she worked as a RN up in Detroit for 10,000 years. When she died in 2005, we buried her up there.
I saw that you brought a lot of photos over there. What were in those photos?
A little bit of everything, quite a bit of me. Like I said, I started in elementary school, and I came from that to be a band director, be a teacher. And there were a lot of people that said it never would happen, so it did.
What was it like being a band director back then?
For me, it was different. It was better than it is now. That's the reason why I got out of it. The kids are not respected at all. You know, it's just grown into nothing. We started a drum corps, and it went from '99 to 2005, and then we disbanded it. Gas had gotten so high that we couldn't afford to stay on the road. You go on the road for 2 weeks and off for 2 weeks and back on the road for 2 weeks. And I was telling the young lady out there that we drug a trailer around and had a bus and a tractor trailer, doing about close to 10,000 miles in a year in the summer. 2 weeks. And now 2 weeks off, 2 weeks back on, about a month. And I got to Niagara Falls, all over the Midwest, all up in the Northeast, New York City, several places. Like I said, if it had not been for the music, I probably never would have gotten to that.
Where did you teach band?
I taught at Howard High School in Chattanooga. I taught at several of the middle schools down there, and I taught at middle school and elementary school in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So my teaching days were done in Indiana and Chattanooga. I took them to I took the kids at Howard to the Mardi Gras, like the second year I was there. They played on national TV with Dennis Weaver. I think they call it a carousel of music in Nashville. They played the Grand Ole Opry, and so did I. We played the Grand Ole Opry. I was there with UT's band in '64, and it was one of those integrated things. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was. And while I was in college, I worked at the Country Music Hall of Fame. So I got around country music. Don't like it. It was not good. Like I said, I was the first black in the band at University of Tennessee with Jay Julian, Barry McDonald, several of the band directors here in the city. And everything went well until we went to Louisiana. And that's when things got really bad. We were in Birmingham the night before, and I was afraid of the Birmingham because at that time, George Wallace was standing in the door of the University of Alabama, you know, segregation now, segregation forever. And I was thinking that was going to be bad. The next morning, I found out what it was like to be in Mississippi, and in Gulfport, Mississippi, to be exact, on the Gulf. And they refused to feed me. And they did, not the school, the restaurant. And we went on down to the Sheraton Charles on Canal Street, and that's where we were housed. Had no problem. Went down to Bourbon Street, and it had all kinds of problems. They knew who I was and where I came from. It got so bad that they would put me in the front of the door, and they would close the door, and we would go to the next place, and they'd close the door again. So we went down there on like Wednesday or Thursday. We came back on Sunday, and I stayed in the hotel most of the time. Wasn't supposed to be there either. By being with the University of Tennessee, I did get to do some things, but not many. I feel like Forrest Gump a lot of times because I got to see the President Johnson. I got to play for John Kennedy. I just got to see him briefly coming through the city. A lot of the things like he was going through, I was going through. You know, we had riots at Tennessee State, and like 2 or 3 of them. When Martin Luther King got killed, and there was one prior to that. A lot of brick throwing and burning and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a different time to come up in the '60s. and very volatile at times. And I left there, and like I said, I went to Indiana, and I found out that no matter where you go, problems follow you. You know, you can go north, but it doesn't change. It doesn't change. I was not humiliated. I think that's what they thought would happen, but I was not. I felt strong. What I did feel was scared, but I kept saying over and over in my mind, yea, though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And that was what got me through. That's what got me through. And I didn't take the licks upside the head like some of the other folks did, but it was still pretty bad. It was still pretty bad. It's changed, things got better, but it's making another change now. It's getting worse. It's going back to what it was. And point fingers, you start having one pointing forward and three pointing back, but there's a lot of things that have gone wrong in the last few years that are just really, really bad. They are really, really wrong. They put the R in wrong. Like I said, it's making a bad change. It's making a bad change. We're going back. If we're not careful, we'll be back in the 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, all over again. Not good. I remember walking from here when I was in school at Oakland, and I caught the bus and I went by Fulton, I went by Smithwood, I went by all these schools that I could have gone, but I didn't because of my color. And after it was over with, it let me know that things weren't quite right. And I remember during the summer I would walk from here to catch the bus down to Smithwood or over on Jacksboro Pike. And there were a group of little white kids that lived over there by the cemetery at the time. They were hands. They lived there. And they would call us names quite frequently, call me names quite frequently. And most of the time I was walking by myself. I would walk over, and most of the time I would get back in time for my dad to pick me up, and Smith wouldn't come on home. Like I said, he worked as a grave digger over there in the 40s. And then we went to Detroit, and he worked in a junkyard. And after he came back, he got a job at Hull Dobbs down on Broadway. And that left. He left there and he went to Plastiline. And he stayed there until the late 80s. So I don't know if you know what Plastiline is or not. Plastiline, at that time, they've been sold out. But two brothers, Harry Brooks and Ralph Brooks, started it. And they made signs. Eventually they made the Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket. They made that. The ice cream cone for Kay's ice cream, they made that. They made Sinclair signs, Coca-Cola signs. They make a Coca-Cola bottle, big plastic bottle. They made that. They made Esso signs, Exxon signs. They made light signs, plastic signs. But he was one of the few black guys that were working there.
Is that where he ended up? Is that where he retired from?
That's where he retired from. He retired from there.
What brought you all?
And you know where the brown squirrel used to be down on Dutch Valley? Mm-hmm. That's the old building. That's the old building. It started in their garage, but it eventually ended up in that building.